One scientist, I don't recall who it was, made an interesting comment that the universe is not stranger than you imagine. The universe is stranger than you can imagine. And the point being is that you haven't learned anything until you understand how the pyramids were built, the geometrics, the harmonics, the well-established mathematics.
500 years ago, our own civilization wasn't even sure that the Earth is a sphere. And it wasn't until 300 years ago that we knew for certain the exact dimensions of the Earth. But these people knew, because the Great Pyramid turns out to be a mathematical model of the Northern Hemisphere on a scale of 1 to 43,200.
The Great Pyramid also incorporates the value of pi in its construction, a transcendental number thought to have been discovered by the Greeks. And even the slope of the pyramid's walls is odd and complicated.
It's clear that what we have here is an advanced system of mathematics and technology at a time when this isn't supposed to have existed. And to achieve these results, the ancient builders had to use a slope of 52 degrees. Any other slope just wouldn't work. Can all these things be coincidence?
The accuracy of these monuments is almost obsessive. Take the sides of the Great Pyramid. They're each 755 feet long, yet the average variation in the side length is barely 5 inches. We're talking 0.01 of a single percent. Such incredible precision would stretch to breaking point the capacities of modern construction crews. So it's hard to imagine how it was done by primitives only just emerging from the Stone Age.
There's still more worth pondering, like the size of the building blocks.
Some of these blocks, high up in the body of the Great Pyramid, each weigh as much as 100 family-sized cars. Egyptologists remain strangely unpuzzled by this, but frankly, we're very puzzled indeed.
I'm an engineer, and I can tell you that to raise blocks of this size to such heights requires a special crane. Now, for a people who did not have that sort of machines, not even the simplest pulley or the wheel, and using simple copper tools, how could they do this?
Deep within the pyramid, inside a room called the King's Chamber, there is a granite chest so skillfully made it would challenge even modern-day machines. Chris Dunn is a drilling expert.
This is an incredible piece of work and a mystery. How did they do it? The typical way of doing it primitively would be with a bow saw, a bow drill, and they would advance the tool into the piece using sand or a diamond. And to me, that would just take too long, too many years to do this.
Well, let me ask you this then. How do you think they did it?
I think that they had to have used some power tool. Today, if we were to drill this, we would advance the drill into the granite at a rate of 2/10,000ths of an inch per revolution of the drill.
Do you think their drills could possibly be turning as fast as that?
No, they were advancing a lot faster than that.
Faster?
Faster. The drills were advancing into the granite at a rate of 100,000ths of a revolution.
The investigators admit the idea is controversial, but the fact is, the Egyptians were able to cut granite and even diorite, the hardest stone in nature, and drill out the inside of diorite vases where modern-day tools couldn't even reach.
How did they do this? Now let's look at the 3 stars in Orion's belt in relation to the Milky Way. Now, in order to get a perfect match with the pyramids on the ground, the sky needs to be rotated slightly anti-clockwise. This means going back in time, 3000 BC, 4000 BC, 5000 BC.
The computer follows Orion back over the millennia of its precessional cycle.
7,000, 8,000, 9, 10, and in 10,500 BC, that's when we get the perfect match.
It's absolutely amazing.
Well, the whole arrangement freezes the time of 10,500 BC.
The pyramid builders made their terrestrial map to reflect Orion as it looked, and only as it looked, in 10,500 BC.
I'll give you a little interesting fact about that. Those of you who have read the books of Bauval and West, who say that Orion is the copy of the stars in the sky, that when you see the pyramids on the ground in Giza, okay, and you're spot on, because they're a mirror image. They're not a copy of it. They're a mirror image. And the Egyptians don't work that way. So the only way that those could match up would be if the pyramids were built when the earth was up the other way. So the pyramids were built before the last pole shift. Okay? There's no one else that's got that yet. Okay? It's pretty simple. It's like, oh, right. Here's another thing. The Sphinx used to have a lion's head. And if you knew that something was going to happen on a particular date in your calendar, what would you do? You'd mark it. Ahead of schedule, you'd mark it. Well, they knew thousands of years ahead that something was going to come from the constellation of Leo at that time when it lines up there. So the Sphinx wasn't built at the time that it lines up. It was built way before it as a warning to say, when this lines up in the constellation of Leo, that's when the shit's going to hit the fan. And that was the last pole shift.
Alex, quick question.
Yep.
Can you actually see that it's blacked out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But why don't they do it properly and completely remove it so you wouldn't even question that something was blacked out there?
Because we're stupid. And we're not even going to look at that.
There is
Okay.
exactly the address where you can go and punch it.
Yeah.
And who's going to believe anyone that...
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And they'll just discredit you or whatever. Because they just don't want you. And if they discredit you enough and make it difficult enough, then you'll give up, won't you?
Also, Alex, why Egypt?
Egypt.
Why that particular part of the earth? Why it's not somewhere like, I don't know, in Asia?
Okay. There are pyramids off the coast of Japan. There are pyramids in China. They're all built around the 19.5 degree mark. And there's a reason for that. Okay, there's a reason for that. Because that diagram I showed you of the flower of life creates what they call geometric solids. Please tell me I've got a mental block on the sacred geometries. And when you create a tetrahedron, it looks like the Star of David, but imagine they're three-dimensional. And when they fit inside a sphere, the points where these touch are at 19.5 degrees in the latitude. So they're energy points.
So here we have great temples that are found all around the world under the oceans. This is in the Bermuda Triangle. Even from the satellite, looking down on the Atlantic, you will see some kind of a configuration. Looks like a perfect square, and looks like a division of land. This is on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean from the satellite. Most people don't even know this stuff out in the Pacific and in the Atlantic, I mean, that could very well have been some kind of a great civilization, but it's underwater now. And of course, as I said, we know there are many temples all around the world that are covered with water. Off the coast of Cuba, there are whole temples and artifacts, and then of course off the coast of Japan, there are huge temples buried. So it implies that, you know, we've had civilizations on this earth for millions of years that you don't know anything about. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, the oceans were not where they are now. That's why we have great deserts in North Africa. The deserts are the floor of the ocean. After the salt settled down and nothing could grow, they became deserts. So there must have been some kind of a monstrous displacement of land and water hundreds of thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, who knows. But the point is that these temples that are underwater are there and were built by ancient civilizations. We are not the pinnacle of success on the earth. And we are not the smartest. We are degrading. We are degenerating. We're not evolving. We're devolving. So because the people who built the pyramids and the tombs and all of these artifacts in Egypt and around the world were far smarter than we'll ever be. So we are merely seeing the relics of a higher civilization that were here and now are under the ocean.
Now, what happened? The Atlanteans, or those refugees from Lyrae, actually had devices that could harness the geomagnetic forces of the Earth and pull it or force it into a specific location. And when they did this, when it was too powerful, it could break the upper mantle or crust of the Earth and cause it to split and fall in. And that's what they did with Lemuria. They actually used that as a weapon to destroy that continent and make it sink into what now is called the Pacific Ocean. The only remnants of Lemuria that exist above the water, the largest piece is what is now Australia and New Zealand, but also Hawaii, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, all of the South Pacific Islands, as well as California west of the San Andreas Fault Line. The San Andreas Fault Line is a continental split or section between two continental plates. Theoretically, it shouldn't be mostly in the ocean. They should be all together. And so what's left of the western part of California is actually the edge or coastline of what was Lemuria. Now, what I didn't tell you also is planetary geology, which is a long story, but I'll make it very short, and that is all planets that are formed through the ejection of molten material from a star, like our planet was from the sun, are hollow. And the reason they are hollow is because as this molten material is thrown from the sun and starts spinning in space, it starts to cool, and because it's cooling and spinning, it forms into a globular shape, and the outside starts to harden. But as above, so below. Inside, the molten material is also spinning. And as it spins, centrifugal force forces it to the sides. And as it's forced to the sides, it gets pushed out of openings that appear at what would be the poles. And so then the inside becomes cool as the molten material exits, and then the inside layer starts to harden and cool. So what in effect you have is you have a globe with two openings. The inside portion, or the very center, has what's left of the molten material through gravitational forces suspended in the center of the globe. And in between the outer and inner crusts is the molten material that is trapped between the two hardened layers. And on both sides, plates form or cracks form as they shift. And that's when you have fault lines and even volcanoes form that push out the molten material. And in fact, planetary science has shown that at the 19th parallel of all such planets are volcanic activity. On the Earth, it shows on the Hawaiian Islands, the west coast of South America, southeastern Asia, and even across to Africa. On Mars, the largest volcano in this solar system, the Mons volcano, is located at the 19th parallel. And on Jupiter, the red spot on Jupiter is located at the 19th parallel. This is planetary science of any kind of structure that is thrown from its sun. That's why the Earth actually is hollow. And that's why This is called the inner earth, and this is the surface. And that's why in the Bible it says, it talks about creatures on the earth and in the earth. That's what it's talking about. Now, in between the outer and inner crusts or surface areas, there are fractures that have existed, or cave or tunnel systems that have formed naturally and some not so naturally, that connect the two sides together. The opening at the North Pole is about 1,300 miles wide, and the opening at the South Pole is 950 miles wide, except this is covered in ice and snow. This one is wide open. And in fact, Admiral Byrd, when he went to the North Pole back in the 1920s, as he approached the North Pole, actually saw open waters, tropical flowers and plants floating in that water, and what you would consider tropical or prehistoric animals like mammoths still at the very edge of this opening. And that is why aircraft are not allowed to fly directly over the North Pole. It has nothing to do with magnetic disturbances. It has to do with they don't want you to see what's there. Plus, the aurora borealis is nothing more than this molten material suspended in the center radiating out and causing the effect of the aurora borealis under certain conditions. It has nothing to do with radiations from the sun. All of that is false science. And very soon they'll be giving you this information. Just like I told you 2 and 3 years ago when I was here, that in 2000, 2001, 2002, they're going to start giving you information based on not only the Earth, but their actual secret government. And what's happened in the last 6 months? They told you there are underground bases. They told you there's a shadow government. They told you yesterday they knew there was going to be an attack. They're telling you everything because they want you to know now. They want you to know so that it will induce fear in you, and you will pay attention and do whatever they say. When someone holds all the cards and they're going to win, you want to be on their good side. That's the idea behind it. But I'll get to that in a moment. So this is planetary structure. When Lemuria sank into the ocean, or actually sank into the upper surface or upper crust of this area, many of the survivors or refugees of that continent went into the inner earth, where they exist to this very day. And that began the ancient rumors of hell and fire underneath the earth and demonic creatures that live under the earth. That's where those ancient myths and rumors got started, is when the reptilians had to go inside the earth in order to survive. And so the Atlanteans, in their zeal to control everything, also destroyed their own continent by manipulating the geomagnetic force underneath their continent. And they collapsed over 3 different cataclysms into what is now the Atlantic Ocean. All that is left of the Atlantean continent is Bermuda, most of the Caribbean islands, and Azores and the Canaries. Most of the rest is submerged. And in fact, recently, and I believe it was summer of 2001, a submarine working for U.S. research, geological research, was going through the mid-Atlantic range south of Bermuda, where there's this tremendous trench with very high mountains, and they photographed what they said looked like skyscrapers. Of course, they said it was most likely natural formation over millions of years, and sediment built up and coral built up. But when you saw the picture, and I didn't bring it with me, but it looks just like what you would think of Manhattan under the ocean. And so little by little, they reveal this information to you. And what happened with the Atlanteans? Those who survived went to what is now Egypt, Greece, North America, and South America, and parts of Central America. And in Central America, it's very interesting because there they mixed with the remnants of the Lemurians. And there was created the Inca Empire, in especially Central and Western South America. Now, contrary to scientific opinion, the American Indians and South American Indians didn't one day decide to leave China and walk across the Bering Straits of Alaska and down North America and to South America. That just did not happen. First of all, their shoes would have worn out a long time before they reached there. Very rough crowd. Next time you come, you got to take some laugh spray. And does it even make sense? Because under that logic, the Indians of South America would have arrived there last, correct? The last location. Then why is it that location had the most advanced civilization? Wouldn't that have taken longer to exist than, let's say, the Eskimos in Alaska? Wouldn't they have the most advanced? They were the first ones there, and they had no civilization. Doesn't hold water at all, because it wasn't true. And so even if you go around the Pacific, you will find curiosities. For example, in New Zealand, you will find in the rural areas stone temples of very high degree and roads that lead from mountainous areas and then end underwater into the Pacific as if they were continuing on, but of course no one knows where they end.